With this, we go to another session, a very important session, and a clinical session, which is uh, quite important in our clinical practice. We have now been talking about guidelines of hypertension and so many other things about hypertension. There are now studies underway where we are trying to find out the epidemiology of hypertension. But one topic which is the most important, because we know hypertension is a disease of comparatively older people, comparatively. It's of course present in the young people also, but then it's comparatively older people. And isolated systolic hypertension seems to be the very, very difficult thing to really manage. For that, we have a wonderful speaker, Dr. Sandeep Tak. Now, no matter how much say about Sandeep Tak, we have been hearing him time and again, and he has been contributing his knowledge to all our programs. I have Dr. Anil Agarwal with me, who is going to introduce Dr. Sandeep Tak, and we want to hear everything about isolated systolic hypertension by Dr. Sandeep Tak.
This is my privilege to introduce Dr. Sandeep Tak, who is professor at the Department of Medicine, SN Medical College, Jodhpur, already online faculty program chair of external diabetology program of Taxila, American University Center, Nicaragua, member of RSSDI, AC, IRA, and API, various publications and national and international journals. Now I invite Dr. Sandeep Tak to deliver lecture on isolated systolic hypertension.
Thank you, Agarwal sir. Good evening to everybody. Minal sir, thank you for providing this opportunity. After this very current and burning topic of climate changes, I would be discussing about a very antiquated topic, that is isolated systolic hypertension. So basically, isolated systolic hypertension is a very old problem, and till now there is no definite consensus what constitute isolated systolic hypertension. They are variable definition depending upon the time when it was studied or studies was done. So basically, I will go through the history and basics of the isolated systolic hypertension. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, we all know what the blood pressure is. It's basically a force exerted by the blood on the blood vessel walls, and it depends on the force of contraction of the heart and how elastic or is the arterial wall, and also the volume and viscosity of the blood. Basically, these three important factors decides the blood pressure. Clinically, hypertension may be defined as a level at which, when we institute a treatment, it would reduce the morbidity and mortality. Currently, most of the guidelines that suggest that the blood pressure more than 140 millimeter systolic or more than 90 millimeter diastolic should be considered as a hypertension. These parameters has changed over a period of time. In the early 20th century, it was considered as an essential hypertension. Term essential was there because at that time it was thought that the elevation of the blood pressure is compensatory reaction to overcome the ischemia because of the arterial constriction. So that's at that time it was thought that this rise in the blood pressure is a compensatory mechanism. That's why it was called as a essential hypertension. Earliest evidence of the benefits of controlling the blood pressure not came from the doctors or medical journal, but from the insurance companies. In the 1911, one insurance company director said that sphygmomanometer is indispensable in the life insurance examination. And this was actually published in the Society of Actuaries, that is insurance journals. And they told that the ratio of the deaths due to the organic disease of the heart, Bright's disease, that's hypertensive nephropathy basically, cerebral hemorrhage or apoplexy, per 10,000 is dependent on the blood pressure in the old age as well as the middle age. So in the 1920-25, it was detected that the high blood pressure is associated with increased mortality and morbidity, and it was first confirmed by the insurance companies. After that, there are several studies which suggest that the rise in the blood pressure is associated with the morbidity and mortality, and it's now a standard line that with every 20 millimeter of the diastolic or every 10 millimeter of the or every 20 millimeter of the systolic or every 10 millimeter rise of the diastolic pressure is associated with a 2 times increased risk of mortality and morbidity. As the blood pressure increases, we have a persistent rise in this mortality with the rise of the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure. And this again shows basically that the risk of heart disease death is according to the blood pressure. As the systolic blood pressure here rises, we can see the definite rise in the mortality in the coronary artery disease in the patients. Diastolic blood pressure has a relation, but it is up to the 90. It's not significant. After 90 or after 100, there is a sudden rise in the risk of cardiac deaths because of the hypertension. So systolic hypertension is much more important than the diastolic hypertension as per these data. Again, MDIF trial, again that showed that the systolic pressure matters more because there is a sharp rapid rise as compared to a diastolic pressure when we are looking for the various morbidities and mortality related to blood pressure. Even so-called normal blood pressure may not be normal and may be associated with increased cardiovascular risk. In this chart, what we can see is even blood pressure 120 systolic and 120 to 129, there is increased risk. 129, 130 to 139 again further increases. So so-called normal blood pressure again is not that is perfectly normal, and it can increase the mortality and morbidity. This slide basically shows that as the systolic blood pressure rises above 100, we have a consistent rise in the risk of MI and stroke. And as it goes beyond the 140, we have a significant rapid rise in the risk of this blood pressure and stroke. But these are the current American Heart Association guidelines, which says that normal blood pressure is which is something less than 120 systolic and less than 80 diastolic. If systolic blood pressure is 120 to 129, but diastolic is normal, it would be called as an elevated blood pressure. If any time diastolic is more than 80 or systolic is 130 to 139, it is called a stage 1 hypertension. And there is next is a stage 2 hypertension, more than 140/90. That's a stage 2 hypertension. Now we don't have a stage 3 hypertension or hypertensive emergency. Beyond 140/90, they says you have to treat all the hypertension aggressively. So basically, why this isolated systolic hypertension occurs? Basically, with the person age, there is a thickening of the arterial vessels, arteriosclerosis, that makes it very stiff and less elastic. And less it elastic, whenever there is a heart contraction, elasticity is lost, and that leads to the increased systolic pressure. Simultaneously, because of the elasticity and collapsibility is also reduced, there may be a fall in the diastolic pressure that leads to the increased pulse pressure in such patients. That's why we have isolated systolic hypertension in the elderly patients much more common than any other age group. So basically, elevation of pulse pressure in isolated systolic hypertension is primarily due to diminished arterial compliance and fall in the diastolic pressure also. We have other causes of increased cardiac output, which may be associated with the wide pulse pressure and isolated systolic hypertension like aortic insufficiency, severe anemia, etc. We have discussed all that. ISH, as I discussed, there is no definite definition, but if we go by the current 2021 guidelines, any blood pressure which is above 130 systolic should be considered as a systolic hypertension. But there was this one study in which isolated systolic hypertension was considered when the blood pressure was more than 140. And here they found that it was associated with the 2 to 4 times increased risk of MI, left ventricular hypertrophy, renal dysfunctions, stroke, and cardiovascular mortality. So different studies has been done with the different cutoff systolic pressures. And in this study, it was 140. That was the SHAPE study. I will come to that. Very old definition was when the systolic blood pressure is more than 160, it would be, and the diastolic pressure less than 90, it would be called as an isolated systolic hypertension. But as per the current guidelines, if we go through that, then any blood pressure above 130 systolic should be considered as a systolic hypertension. Systolic hypertension usually occurs in the older patients, and majority of the older patients have only isolated systolic hypertension. And as we discussed, systolic blood pressure tends to rise and diastolic blood pressure tends to fall with the age, particularly after the age of 60 years. And it is seen in both normotensive as well as untreated hypertensive. So rise in the systolic pressure and gradual fall in the diastolic pressure. And it has been found that the systolic blood pressure and the pulse pressure is very important predictor of the coronary artery disease in the age above 60. In contrast to that, diastolic pressure is important predictor of the CV mortality and morbidity under the age of 50 years. And between 50 to 59, both systolic as well as diastolic hypertension has been found to be a risk factor. So basically, when we are treating with the isolated systolic hypertension, what about the diastolic blood pressures? Because often it is normal, and with the treatment, it may fall further. And there is no specific drug which can specifically treat systolic hypertension and leave away diastolic blood pressure. So there are no clear data which provides the guidance related to the minimum diastolic pressure that can be tolerated. But there are few studies which suggest, particularly the SHAPE study, in which it was found that the active treatment group with the diastolic blood pressure less than 60 had a more cardiovascular events, less than 60 millimeter diastolic pressure. Similarly, in the Rotterdam study, it was found that there was a J-shaped curve with the diastolic blood pressure falling below 65 was associated with increased risk of stroke. So basically, we can say that when we are treating isolated systolic hypertension, we should try to maintain a diastolic blood pressure 60 or above. That's probably acceptable. There are few trials which has particularly looked at the systolic hypertension, and majority of these trials are in the elderly and very elderly patients. Here, mean age, in the SHAPE trial, mean age was 72 with more than 4,000 patients with the systolic hypertension, and aim of therapy was 20 millimeter reduction in the systolic pressure. And result was that there was significant reduction in the CV mortality, morbidity, and stroke in all these patients. It was seen equally in the men, women, even in the patients over the age of 80 years. So there is no age beyond which we should not treat diabetes. We should treat hypertension. We should treat hypertension at all ages. Maybe in very, very elderly, we have to be a bit more cautious, but hypertension should be treated at all ages. Again, this was basically same of the SHAPE trial. The significant difference between the stroke incidence in the active treatment arm and the placebo group. Similarly, in the CYST Euro trial, again, there was the mean age of 70 with the systolic hypertension, more than 4,000 patients. Again, here with the 4-year stroke risk reduction was significant in the treatment group as compared to placebo group, along with the decrease in the mortality as well as the dementia was significantly decreased in the treatment group. So definitely treating hypertension in elderly is meaningful. And lastly, this HIVET trial, they looked at the very old patients. Mean age was 84 years with the systolic blood pressure of at least 160. Again, results were same. Reduction in the blood pressure was associated with the reduction in the fatal stroke, reduction in all types of strokes, and all-cause mortality was also reduced in the HIVET trial. So even in this very elderly 80+ age group, target good blood pressure control with a target blood pressure less than 150 may help in reducing the significant CV mortality and morbidity. SPRINT trial is one more trial which shows the systolic pressure reduction was associated with the significant reduction in the primary outcome, that is CVA strokes, myocardial infarction, as well as death from any cause. Again, both these factors were reduced with the systolic blood pressure control. So basically, blood pressure control is very important, and systolic blood pressure plays a very important role in the various complications, including the dementia, stroke, and all-cause death. And these are the summary of most of the trials. And what we see is basically with the reduction of the blood pressure, we have a significant reduction in the stroke, coronary artery disease, but most important is heart failure reduction is maximum when we control the blood pressure, systolic blood pressure. 50 to 60% patients, 50% reduction in the heart failure incidence if the blood pressure is nicely controlled. So what are the treatment options and general principles? We need to consider a number of issues when treating isolated systolic hypertension because most of these patients are elderly patients. We have to check their cardiac status, renal status, and finally look for the benefit versus risk of treatment because postural hypotensions and these symptoms can cause fall and further deteriorate their condition. So we have to consider the benefit versus risk also. Because the older patients have a sluggish baroreceptor reflex with the sympathetic neural response is also slow. That's why they have an impaired cerebral autoregulation, postural hypotension, and they, at times, in fact, if we reduce the blood pressure very rapidly, these patients may develop a stroke. So we should be starting with the lower initial dose, probably half than what we usually use in the younger patients. And the primary goal of antihypertensive treatment in this patient is to reduce the cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. We should try to achieve a blood pressure less than 140 systolic. But again, we have to look at the diastolic pressure and it should not go below 60 millimeter of the mercury. And in case of the patients with the hypertension with the diabetes or kidney disease, target should be 130 systolic or diastolic 80. So cornerstone of all these management starts with the lifestyle changes, and that's a very important thing. And these are the various lifestyle changes which can cause significant reduction in the systolic blood pressure. Weight reduction to the tune of 10 kilogram can reduce the blood pressure by 5 to 20 millimeters of the mercury. DASH dieting or diet planning can significantly reduce the blood pressure again by to the tune of 8 to 14 millimeter mercury. Sodium restriction has a modest effect, 2 to 8 millimeter mercury. Physical activity again improves the systolic pressure, and stopping alcohol can also reduce the blood pressure by 2 to 4 millimeter of the mercury. So these are the various lifestyle changes we should be advising. This is the typical DASH diet, which is high in the vegetables, grain, low fat, dairy, seafoods, beans, and olive oils, etc. And with minimum of the simple carbohydrates. That's the basically DASH diet, and it has a significant impact on the systolic pressure as well as the diastolic pressure. Treatment options is no different from the what we used to treat most of the other patients. Diuretics are very effective in lowering the systolic blood pressure in the elderly population. There is evidence that over the age of 60 years, systolic chlorothalidone has a very good effect on the reduction of the systolic pressure. Main thing is these may cause a dehydration, orthostatic hypotension, can cause hyperuricemia and dysglycemia. These are the side effects of the thiazide diuretics. Thiazide diuretics can cause a rise in the blood sugar also. If we are using the potassium sparing diuretics like the aldosterone antagonist, spironolactone, that can cause the hyperkalemia and renal function and potassium need to be monitored in these patients. Beta blockers does not have any convincing or definitive benefits over the diuretics, but when they are comorbid conditions in which the beta blockers are indicated, definite coronary artery disease, post-myocardial infarction, heart failure, supraventricular and ventricular arrhythmias, these are all the conditions in which beta blockers are indicated, and we should be using beta blockers also there. Calcium antagonist has a very good effect on the systolic hypertension, and once upon a time it was considered to be drug of choice for the treatment of the systolic hypertension. Most adverse effect of the calcium channel blockers are because of the vasodilation causing the ankle edema, headache, or postural hypotension. First generation, this dihydropyridines calcium antagonist should be avoided. Verapamil, nifedipine should be avoided, particularly in patients with the left ventricular dysfunction. ACE inhibitors definitely are very good drugs, good BP lowering effect, and they should be considered when there are definite indication for use of the ACE inhibitors, like the patients with the heart failure, coronary artery disease, diabetes, or diabetic nephropathy. Side effects we all know, needs to monitor the renal function and watch for the hyperkalemia. But many patients may not tolerate the ACE inhibitor because of the cough symptoms. Then we can use ARBs or angiotensin receptor blockers, and they are better tolerated than the ACE inhibitors. They are as effective as the ACE inhibitors, and again indications are same. Heart failure, type 2 diabetes, diabetic nephropathy, indications are same. but most of the patients does not respond to single drug. In such case, we need combination of 2 or more drugs to control the systolic blood pressure. Preferential combinations are the ACE inhibitors with a diuretic, or ARB with a diuretic, or ACE inhibitor or ARB with the calcium antagonist. And probably this is the most effective combination which is used. And this was proven in the accomplished trial that this combination is much better than the ACE inhibitors with the diuretic combination. So to conclude, isolated systolic hypertension is a common problem, particularly in elderly because of the arteriosclerosis. Judicious and cautious use of antihypertensive in the elderly has a potential to reduce CV morbidity and mortality. Aim of treatment to bring the systolic blood pressure less than 140, if possible less than 130, but without lowering the diastolic blood pressure less than 60 millimeter of mercury. So this is usually the first slide, and I have kept in the last. That's the tip of iceberg we see. And another thing, Kaplan quote in the 1998 in American Journal of Hypertension, that the measurement of the blood pressure is the clinical procedure of the greatest importance that is performed in the slopiest manner. And still, I think most of whenever we see the clinician measuring the blood pressure, it's needs improvement. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sandeep. What a wonderful, clear indication of a difficult topic. I know it's a very difficult thing to treat, although we don't have much choices. But now the latest guidelines you have shown, the 2021 guidelines, are also quite clear. In for JNC 7 or JNC 8, which gave us certain guidelines that we could keep a blood pressure of 150/90 safely. But now it has become quite clear anything above 140/90 has to be treated in any case, and it's better to keep the blood pressure as low as 120/80. Of course, there has been a lot of controversies during the last 3 years, but I think these guidelines which you have shown today will help our clinicians to bring the blood pressure as lower as possible, clinically possible. Although difficult to treat, but yes, diuretics and chlorthalidone and things like that, there are which are showing a better reduction of high blood pressure, even the very elderly people. With indapamide, there has been a study with even 85 years of age. So thank you very much, Sandeep. If there are any questions,
thank you, sir.
Sir, there are
do we have any?
There are
Yes.
3 types of blood pressure instruments: sphygmomanometer, mercury, Android, and electronic. Which one is better? Because we take blood pressure by all the 3, they are different measurements in all the 3. Which is better?
So nowadays, in most of the developed countries, electronic instruments are the gold standards. Android and mercury sphygmomanometer is almost banned. Android are used sometimes, but this electronic instruments are the gold standard, and they don't change the reading, because at times what happens when we are measuring the blood pressure, we see the blood pressure of 143/80. So what we will write? 140/80. We skip that 3 digits, or 146/80. So we just write 140/80. So that's not a right way to do it. And electronic instruments are the gold standard. We should be having a good quality electronic instrument.
Thank you, sir.
But unfortunately, we don't have standardization of BP instruments in our country as such. So whatever instruments are available, in fact, they are all non-standardized instruments. And that's why there is a discrepancy of blood pressure levels in all our patients. That's the problem, which I think Dr. Anil Agarwal wants to point out, that there is quite a bit of difference. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep Tak. It was really wonderful hearing you, and I really thank you for giving us time. You have been always very kind to participate in our program. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. It was my pleasure.